Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating. For a really long time, we thought of psychedelics mainly in the context of, mood enhancement or having these big emotional breakthroughs. But we're shifting gears today. We're going to see how psilocybin is moving way beyond just mood. It's actually acting as a biological tool that physically restructures our sleep machinery. Right off the bat, I want you to listen to this quote. Insomnia isn't a mood problem. It isn't a willpower problem. It is a broken neural architecture problem. Man, if you or anyone you know has ever laid awake staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., struggling with chronic insomnia, especially alongside anxiety and or depression, you know exactly how incredibly frustrating it is to just be told to relax or practice better sleep hygiene. But as this illustrates perfectly, insomnia is not some personal failing. It is a physical, structural collapse of the brain's sleep machinery. So that leads us directly to the million-dollar question, right? How do we actually fix this physical machinery once it's completely broken? Instead of just numbing the brain into unconsciousness, how do we rebuild it? Well, today we are looking at a brand new architectural reset framework. We're posing psilocybin as the potential, highly precise tool that neuroscience has found to act as basically both a wrecking ball to bad habits and a builder of new, healthy neural pathways. Part 1. The Sleep Architecture Collapse. To really understand the cure, we first have to understand the collapse. Because sleep isn't just one long, uniform blackout. It's a highly orchestrated cycle of distinct stages. But in certain psychiatric conditions, the stages responsible for processing emotional memory and physical restoration just get profoundly disrupted. Take major depressive disorder, for instance. In these cases, REM sleep accelerates pathologically. Patients get shoved into REM way too early in the night, and they spend a disproportionate amount of time in the state associated with heavy, negative emotional rumination. And at the exact same time, N3 slow-wave sleep, which is that deep, physically restorative phase where your brain literally clears out neurotoxic waste, is severely suppressed. It shrinks. So you might spend 8 hours physically in bed, but you wake up exhausted and totally emotionally raw. Part 2. The default mode problem. Okay, so what is actually causing this collapse in the first place? We have to look upstream. We need to look at the exact moment you try to fall asleep. Enter the default mode network, or DMN. Think of this as your brain's idling engine. When you're lying in bed, running through tomorrow's anxieties and yesterday's mistakes on a loop, your DMN is running the show. And functional MRI studies by researcher Eric Knopfsinger consistently highlight something remarkable. In insomniacs, DMN activity is highly elevated, right at the crucial moments when the brain should be transitioning into quiet sleep. So the really crucial point here is that the pathology isn't necessarily the content of those 2 a.m. anxieties, it's the timing. It's the DMN's failure to just disengage and hand over the keys to your sleep onset systems. The brain's worst habit, turning completely inward and ruminating, just intensifies right when it should be shutting down. Part 3. The psilocybin reset. This brings us to the intervention. Let's look at how standard treatments compare to psilocybin when it comes to tackling this hyperactive DMN. They are completely different. Standard treatments, like benzodiazepines, just suppress neural activity broadly. They essentially force a state of pharmacological unconsciousness. Sure, you're knocked out, but you aren't getting physiologically restorative sleep. And SSRIs, they chronically elevate synaptic serotonin, which actually reliably suppresses REM sleep and can often make insomnia worse. Psilocybin, on the other hand, operates completely differently. It doesn't chronically dampen the system. Instead, it delivers a profound, acute disruption. Think of it like a transient system reset. And it pulls this off through the 5-HT2A receptor. Psilocybin acts as an agonist on these very specific receptors. Now, why does that matter? Well, because these receptors are densely packed in the thalamus, the Raphe nuclei, and the locus coeruleus. Those are the precise brain structures that regulate your transitions between waking, non-REM, and REM sleep. By directly targeting these sleep-regulating circuits, psilocybin basically interrupts the DMN's pathological dominance. Part 4. REM rebound and restoration. So what does this reset actually look like once someone closes their eyes? We have this great clinical polysomnographic data from a 2020 study by Dudasova and colleagues that shows us exactly what goes down. On the night of the session itself, what they call night 0, psilocybin actually causes increased wakefulness and suppresses REM sleep. The brain is still super aroused. So yeah, there is a cost to the reset. But the real magic happens on the recovery nights. Slow wave sleep, that deep, physically restorative N3 phase we were just talking about, is dramatically enhanced. And REM sleep doesn't just return, it rebounds. It comes back incredibly robust and intense.
And this perfectly illustrates why this is an absolute game changer, especially for patients dealing with PTSD. Normally, folks with PTSD have a hyperreactive amygdala, which means their sleep gets completely flooded with stress hormones, essentially turning REM sleep into a nightmare factory. But during the psilocybin-induced REM rebound, emotional memories are processed in a neurochemical environment that is entirely stripped of stress hormones like norepinephrine. It's basically overnight therapy and fear extinction. We literally have multiple clinical reports documenting the complete cessation of nightmares in PTSD patients following this therapy.
Part 5. Building new neural pathways. But listen, this isn't just a temporary functional shift. We are literally rebuilding the physical infrastructure of the brain's prefrontal circuits. Check out this number, 10%. In a landmark 2021 study by Shao and colleagues, researchers found a massive 10% increase in prefrontal dendritic spine density within just 24 hours of a single psilocybin dose. And the structural growth? It persists for weeks. Your brain is literally growing brand new physical connections.
The engine driving all this growth is a protein called BDNF, which gets activated via the mTOR pathway. Now, this is not just some vague, abstract idea of neuroplasticity. BDNF is actively, physically rebuilding the prefrontal circuits that act as the brakes on the default mode network. It is repairing the exact infrastructure your brain needs to stop those endless ruminative loops right at sleep onset. Let's map out the timeline for a second. Day 0 is the session itself, along with that acute disruption we talked about. But look at days 3 through 14. This is the absolute critical integration window. This is when BDNF elevation and enhanced synaptic plasticity are peaking. And it's exactly during this precise window that the neural networks regulating your sleep reorganize and solidify, which ultimately leads to those sustained sleep improvements we see around weeks 4 to 6. And this all triggers what we can call a virtuous cycle. Step 1. Psilocybin acutely disrupts the DMN. Step 2, that massive neuroplasticity window opens up, enabling way better sleep. Step 3, and this leans on the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, that newly achieved high-quality sleep literally acts as the consolidation engine. Good sleep physically wires in the new neural pathways, which naturally leads to Step 4, durable, lasting structural improvements. Basically, the pharmacology sets the stage, but the sleep itself actually builds the architecture.
Part 6. Evidence and unknowns. Now, while this all sounds incredibly promising, we've got to stay grounded in the science here. We need to evaluate the clinical trials objectively and be totally transparent about what we still don't know. But wow, the clinical data we do have is striking. In a 2021 Johns Hopkins trial by Davis and colleagues looking at major depressive disorder, they tracked sleep using the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. They found that a staggering 72% of participants showed clinically significant improvement in their sleep quality after just 2 sessions. That is an absolutely enormous success rate for people who suffer from severe sleep disruption. However, we have to talk about the limitations, because there are several. First off, we don't yet have randomized controlled trials where sleep is actually the primary endpoint. All this amazing data, it comes from secondary measures and trials that were primarily focused on depression. On top of that, the optimal dose for sleep is a total mystery right now. The depression trials usually used a high 25 milligram dose. And perhaps the biggest question mark, we don't know if this works for non-psychiatric primary insomnia. If your bad sleep is caused by sleep apnea or circadian disruption rather than a hyperactive DMN, psilocybin might not be the answer at all.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought. If fixing chronic sleep issues tied to trauma and depression is actually about physically rebuilding neural architecture rather than just chemically suppressing symptoms night after night, what other biological machinery in mental health are we currently treating completely incorrectly? It's a massive, fascinating question that really challenges our entire pharmacological approach. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gave you a solid look into the future of sleep neuroscience.